you can hear. Okay, so we will start today's session. So good day, everyone. Thank you for joining this session as part of our PTP training. And also today's training is also forming part of my trainer development and also the training activity. So during this session, the entire session will be recorded for around 2 hours time. So make sure you have signed the attendance form and also the consent form, right? Okay, so the objective today is simple. This is to strengthen and improving our governance and control on, particularly on receiving an invoice reconciliation. Okay, I'll be guiding you through what governance looks like in our daily operations. So not just on the system steps, because although the deck might involve a lot of the system generic kind of things related to the system, but how each actions will improve and impact our financial accuracy and compliance and also our audit readiness under our one source framework. Okay. So today in the course outline, this is the part where I've been sharing. And the objective will be reinforcing the linkage between operational execution and also the financial control within the P2P framework. So this is to strengthen some of our participants on the understanding of the checkpoints from PR, PO, GR, IR, up until to the Q. We will enable the processor to identify and also prevent control breaches during this invoice and receiving and our reconciliation process. Okay. So this is just to build some of the awareness of the audit expectations and month-end governance responsibilities, because you may notice in some of our affiliates, they are increasing concerns raising about some of the controls requirements that we need to fulfill to support some of our audit justifications and audit documentations. So we will touch base on that during our course objectives. Okay. And lastly, we'll also develop some of the collective accountability and continuous improvement under our framework from EM. Okay. So before we start, maybe we can have a quick introduction from all of our participants. You can share from which department you're from. Yeah. Yes, I'll be starting.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Ashraf Panjunapa. Currently, I'm taking care of Thailand payment from Police-Care. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Anis and I'm the admin for finance for P2P. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Alicia. I'm in charge of Indonesia, and right now for Indonesia is for invoice processing, and for Vietnam is in.
Hi everyone, my name is Chloe. I'm an intern for the P2P department. And I just help if anyone needs any help. So I just give.
Hello everyone, my name is Jordan. I'm in charge of Vietnam, Indonesia, and Philippines. Yeah.
So thanks for the introduction. And those who are online, if you may interested to share about yourself, you can do so. And if not, then we will continue with that session. Is that fine with you? Okay, I'll take that. Yeah, thanks, Jinda, for your introduction. Okay, I think we have pretty much everyone here. Okay, so coming back to our learning outcomes, by the end of this program, each of us will be able to explain some of the end-to-end P2P flow and the key control gates, and we'll also know how to apply some of our big level principles as in OGRIR, and also identify and resolve some of the exceptions responsibly. We need to see that if there's any scenarios that we are facing throughout the units, different scenarios of GRR being handled. Okay, and also some of the month-end controls and audit checklist reviews. How do we execute that as part of our controls? Okay, so lastly, we will demonstrate some of the understanding of the governance ownership, and this is also part of our PTP and also professional role. Okay, the controls and governance part. Okay. So I will move on to our main details. So as just now we've talked about the first outline. So now moving on to today's agenda, starting from the slides. Okay, the first one. Okay, I will start off from what we are having today on this overview of our end-to-end process. Is it a bit small? I need to, can everyone see this clearly? Okay. So based on this PLC marketplace, the video cannot see me. So the ELC marketplace, I will use this as an example for the standard process for what we are facing through a PRU and PRI. So this also helps us to link to our daily operations as in the non-PO process as well, because once we know the standard process and the standard controls, then we get to know that how do we apply it to our daily lives on the daily operations of non-PO. Okay, so from this PLC marketplace, we are having this diagram flow that we start from everything. Whenever we want to buy something, we will start from create the requisition. So there are many ways to buy, and there will be different buying channels. So this is initiated from the requester, PLC requester. This requester can be derived from our business department and affiliates, whomever they want to initiate to buy something. Okay. Later on, I will move on with some of the real life scenarios, an example of what they are buying. Okay. And then next, here comes our control. When they requested something, definitely we will need someone to approve. Maybe Chloe, can you share like what kind of things that we need to approve? Why do we need that?
So that like you cannot simply buy whatever you want. You need to make sure that it's in line with campaign or the business needs and all that.
You're looking at me. So, what kind of things that the approver should be approved?
In terms of purchasing starting, yeah, it's must have the within the guideline, and then it's as long as it's give a benefit to the brand or the campaign or the promotion during that time.
Yeah. So you also got it right. And so here the approval has to include firstly, like what Ashok has mentioned, the purpose of this thing, why they are buying this thing. And secondly, also the approver serving as the head of the department for that department, of that division of brand, they have to ensure that this purchase is actually within the limit and the budget of their department. So when they approve something, this is within their limited budget per the company's directions, and also the purpose fits to that purpose and able to be beneficial to DLC as what you mentioned. So when we want to buy something, they also have to be specific, like what is the quantity of that things, and how much does it cost. So with that unit price and the number of units, then they are able to know that how much in total we are going to spend on this thing, on the project, or so the approval stage on this step 2 is actually a key control point. So the key control point it serves a very important place within our entire process flow. So I'll bring that up in a later topic that we are recently also doing for some of our RCM, which is a risk control matrix. So I'll touch point on that later on. Okay, so once it is approved, then our system, it will generate the purchase order, and that purchase order, it will be generated in the form of a purchase order, like which vendor I'm choosing, what kind of things I'm buying, and when is the expected delivery, and what are the details of the items that I'm buying.
And my question on the PO when generated by system is limited to 10 digit only. Or if what happens if the PO number is 10 digit is already fully within, it's already to the end, what will happen?
Okay, so actual question is more towards on the system wise. So this PO number is actually generated from the setting maintained by our buying center. So they have a certain logics. Let's say for ELC, you start beginning from 35901, and in some certain other companies they use a different generic. So this setting, it is actually maintained by our buying center, and usually they would have a very long strings of the numbers that allows the PO keep running. Yeah. Okay. But in terms of the very system thing, I am not too expert on this. I will touch base on that in a bit.
Okay, thank you.
So when we have already gotten the purchase order, so what will happen? Maybe Anis, can you share like what happens if we have the purchase order?
You need to submit that order number that already with it.
Okay. Then what happens?
Then you come up with the PO.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So once we have that PO, what will go on? What happens next?
And the PO, and when the PO will go, is it the post? Is it together with the posting thing?
We haven't reached that yet.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So okay. So let's say if I give one example of make it more simple by purchasing goods. Later on, I'll give an example on purchasing services. So on the purchasing goods, so let's say if we have already raised purchase requisition. So this month, I said OSKL level 12, we are going to order 10 boxes of pens. And then we raise that purchase order, have purchase requisition of that 10 boxes, total having 200 pens. Okay. And that 200 pens is about 200 ringgit. Okay. So when that approval, let's say Janice has already approved it, and we have already gotten the PO being generated. So what happens next is then the vendor can start preparing, okay, your 200 pens, and start packing, preparing, and try to fulfill your order. So we call this process as a order fulfillment. So because we send to the supplier, we have that PO, we inform the vendor, and then the vendor starts fulfilling our order request. they start doing the packing, and then they start deliver. Okay, so once the vendor has already prepared the 200 pens, then what happens next? Yeah, you can try it.
With the, is it receipt? After the vendor send us the pen, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got the receipt.
It's called a proof of delivery. Yeah. So with that, that also serves as another control point, key control point, as proof of delivery. Why it is a key control point? Maybe Joey, you can answer us.
We need to ensure if we really receive the goods or service, only you can proceed by standing.
Yes. Thanks for the answer. So with that, we have the POD, and we ensure that we order 200 pens, and what I receive in actual is also 200, because it cannot be 180. If there's only 180, then we will have to ask for the remainder as well. Okay, so once we have confirmed this goods is being received with that 200 pens that we've ordered from the beginning. So what happens next is we have reached into the invoicing process. So the supplier will submit an invoice to us because we have already acknowledged, okay, 200 pens I have received, and so now I issue you an invoice. So this is where we start to begin with the invoice that we need to take for the payment. Okay, so that falls under the payment process, and once the payment is done, then only this is a PO considered as a PO closure. Because 200 pens ordered, 200 pens fulfilled, the goods received is 200, the invoice received is also 200. I pay 200 on the pens, and then it is considered as a PO closure. So this is the entire process. Okay. So there are few checking points. The key control points is that firstly, ultimately is the approval. Approval is the utmost important key controls here. And second is our goods being delivered, and we need someone to check, because sometimes the goods being delivered and then they just left it in the store. No one going to receive and tick, I got really 200 pens. And then that is where we have the discrepancy and disputes with the vendors later. Okay, so these two are the very key control points at this juncture.
So for a non-PO request, is the steps exactly the same?
That's a very good question, because for non-PO, generally in the outside world as well, we don't really recommend the non-PO process unless it is necessary. So what kind of things usually falls under the non-PO process? The generic ones are utilities and mobile phone fees, because we use the usage, then only we know how much we have used, and then only we can do that payment. So usually in the common world, these fall under the utilities. These are fall under the non-PO criteria. But then for ELC, of course, there are still some of the improvements that we can improve for some of the scenarios whereby we are still having purchasing of the services, purchasing of the goods, and sometimes we have event and then asking for the catering services, and no one is ordering that before. So that is not really the ideal scenario. So the ideal one, even though we're ordering one catering, we should be ordering from the purchase requisition from the beginning, so that we can ensure that that PR has been raised and that approval is already in place. Because when sometimes if we are just going for one caterer, hey, you arrange like I need under the budget 5,000, and then you just arrange for us everyone, and then no one is approving it, so that is a control failure. Okay.
But the steps will still be the same.
The steps is actually generally the same. So what happens is, to some of our direct entry and non-PO outside of this picture, is that direct entry, it is actually not a common flow and not an ideal flow. So it's only a flow where they help us to build a flow to get the approvals after we collect our invoice. So you see, it's actually not in this sequence. The approval has to be right at the beginning, but not after we get the invoice. So what happens if we only get the invoice and then we get the approval? Because that may be not something approval wants to approve. Yeah, so let's say she thinks that, hey, why you buy 300 pens? We only need 200 because you only have 200 staff. So that might be questioned. So a lot of times our direct entry flow, what happens is that the approval then only they realize, hey, how come this is hitting my budget? Why this is something that we did not budget in the first place? And we do not honor this invoice. So this is something might be happening. And maybe Alicia, you can also share like if there's any scenarios or samples that you might be some of the key scenarios or challenges that you met during this process,
For the direct entry.
Oh, yeah. And
I think for me, the most challenging is like the obvious, like my vendor, right? Some, I mean for example, the Pulau Mahoni, they want, the PO requester already like granted the PO amount, but then the invoice is not tied back to the PO amount. So we need to like confirm which amount that we need to pay back. We need to confirm from the vendor and also the PO requester. Because like quite many times, the PO amount is insufficient to cover the invoice amount.
so your case is also one of the scenarios that we can discuss as well. So it is a real life scenario that usually happens in a lot of cases. Because some people, they tend to raise a PO with a minimal budget and get it approved, but then they try to utilize over it. And they ask for 200. And they ask the vendor, hey, you give me 500 pens. And what happens with PO and the invoice is we are still required to pay that vendor 500 pens because we've got the 500 pens. Then they only come back to us to get the additional approval on that PO variations. Yeah, thanks for your scenario. Okay, so far, how about the on the line? Okay, so if there's no other questions, then I'll move forward. Yeah, so the GRIM, so when we talk about the GRIM, this is a general ledger payment account used as a temporary placeholder between the goods received and the invoice received. Because definitely we will be having scenarios of the timing difference. We cannot say that we order today and then I received the chip today and then the vendor immediately is able to issue that invoice directly. It's because sometimes in between there could be disputes, there could be different units being delivered, and maybe the vendor they send it into 2 batches. From that 200 times, they send 50 for the first time, 150 for the second time. So this is a temporary account to serve that GR. We have already acknowledged the receipt, acceptance of the goods and the services. And then IR is the commercial document which is issued by the seller to the buyer, which is what we discussed just now, of the proof of delivery, indicating the products, the quantities, and the agreed price for those that the seller has already provided to the buyer. Okay. So in some certain cases, although it is not a goods, let's say it is a service that we are ordering for one kind of service, cleaning services. So that is not a proof of delivery as a documentation, but we can get, let's say the cleaner timesheet. They can use that as a basis, saying that, hey, done my work for today, for tomorrow, for this week. So the timesheet is also serving as proof of delivery per se, as an acceptance report, okay, to support our audit requirements. So this GRIR account, we have to ensure the true will match between the PO, GR, and the vendor invoice, because it's a very important thing, because the GR is actually not hitting our P&L. So it's only dangling on our balance sheet account. So with that, our balance sheet account, we always have to ensure it is clear and zeroized. So that is to ensure that we do not understate or overstate our P&L. We do not, our P&L as in our expenses in these POs.
For the IR, here it's mentioned that it's a commercial document issued by vendor. So as a EFC, do we have any document or that we will rejected? For example, I can see some invoice is mentioned pro forma invoice not accepted, but the other invoice is accepted. So what is the reason behind that we will receive pro forma invoice?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. So maybe I get the attendants to answer your questions to see if anyone of you know about this pro forma and the invoice differences. What are the differences? Do you want to take a try?
Forma invoice is like, I think it's like the first step, like both of them agree all the descriptions of that. Then they will issue a pro forma invoice. Then the invoice is the actual, I mean like the, yeah.
The price.
Yes. What I understand is that.
Yes, you are right. So that is true. So for pro forma invoice, it usually refers to some of the things that we also need to make that payment. But somehow, pro forma, it is at a stage where the vendor has not delivered their goods and services, but we have already aligned and agreed to that pricing, units, and etc. So usually when we see a pro forma invoice, it is at a prepayment stage. Prepayment as in we haven't received anything, but we need to make that payment. So maybe you can give some examples of what are the pro forma invoices in your country. Okay, do you have any pro forma? Thank you. So yeah, so in some of the vendors, they usually are requesting for a pro forma invoice because they need some funding, they need capital to fund whatever they are delivering. Usually those amount could be material, as in our renovations. Usually that will happen if we having a pro forma invoice. We need to give a down payment, a prepayment ahead. So then only the vendor, they can start, okay, I go and purchase my materials. Then only I start to do the painting for you, do the aircon installation and everything. So that is where that we need to make that payment before the service is being delivered. And also another common scenario is usually sometimes the hotels also give us a pro forma invoice that it is not an actual invoice. Before the stay, you need to make a payment before they can give you the key. So that is the pro forma invoice comes in. And when you check out, then they will ask you to sign. Okay, you have checked out, just help me to sign, and I'll issue you a text invoice. Yeah, so that is how the invoice is being differentiated. Thanks for that. So I think with your pro forma cases, we are linking back to this GR. A lot of times if we are receiving an pro forma invoice, we cannot do an actual hiring because the service is actually not being delivered. We cannot do that expense being actualized yet because I haven't stayed in the hotel, but I need to ensure I get the key first. But after my stay, I realized, hey, the room is not what I given, so I requested for discount or what. So after that, that will be the Yep. And so this GRIR will have to ensure like three-way match, and also it requires based on that's the keyword when goods and services are actually received. So we have to ensure.
Then in like what you said, the pro forma case, how do you zero price this account?
So after when, let's say it is a renovation, so renovation usually we are being backed by an agreement. So before we have a renovation, we have an agreement saying that what is the milestone. The key milestone could be we get a 30% or 50% down payment, and the remainders are split into like 50%, 40% of that work in progress, and also the final retention rate. So usually it is already backed by an agreement with that different milestone. So when we start getting the pro forma invoice, the prepayment invoice, we already give them, let's say, 50% of that payment. Then they start to deliver and fulfill whatever the service, start buying their paint, start installing the aircon, and then up to which work being done, completion in the middle. So let's say we have two levels of the office. So in that agreement, we have stated that, okay, I want one level being completed, then only start to give you the second milestone payment. So that is how the agreement is being negotiated. So let's say if they say, I want one level completed, I give you the second milestone. I need to see then only we get a formal invoice of that second milestone, and that will comprise of whatever they have already delivered with that 30% that we have already paid upon to them. But it all depends on the agreement, how it's goes.
And then if invoice amount is less than purchase order amount, then it's requester responsible to change the amount. It's our responsible to show it the quantity.
So the requester is actually the most important person to ensure the entire flow. So the onus is the requester themselves, actually. But here in the real scenario for ELC culture, this is where we are seeing a lot of requesters, they are very reliant on finance to help them to clean up the rest, because they have to be the person who tells us, because we are not seeing the goods, we are not able to see what they actually receive. So the onus and the responsibility actually lies upon the requester. So I think I'll also give you an example of how do we bring out of the view writing of this whiteboard. So when we GR, we will debit expense and credit. We call it the temporary account, we call it GRIR account. In our scenario, it is usually 251. Okay, this is a P&L account. And then when we IR, it is where we do this to map it off. GRIR 1 and credit AP. This is our trade payable. Then when we come to payment, since Ashok is here, we have that payment, credit AP, trade payable, and then credit our actual bank. Yep. So this is where we have to balance this off because on that GRIR, it's actually hitting our balance sheet account. It is not hitting into our P&L. So this thing is what auditors, they prefer most to catch us because everything sitting in here is not touching here and it's not touching our money. So it's not touching our cash flow and it's also not touching our P&L. So this is why the auditors always will challenge our GRIR when there is a very huge variance. So we have to ensure that it is being explained and it can be justified by the supporting documents because we cannot just verbally tell them, hey, I received that first, then how do you prove it? So that is where we need the documentation, POT, and etc. Okay. So, okay, when we do the receiving, so there are two receiving options for ELC marketplace orders. This is only cater for ELC. So,
1,000.
yeah, the 5,000. So in outside world, there's no 5,000 in it here. So like what we mentioned just now, in ELC, because of the business departments, they need to focus on a lot of day-to-day routines. So which is why this process is being cascaded from the global to the regionals that they have to set a 5,000 limit. So the small minor amounts, the system help you to do that. Then the requester, they can focus on their day-to-day business operations and they don't need to go into the system and pick one by one. So this is only cater for ELC. But for a very strong governance and controls companies, also they wouldn't have to add this 5,000 criteria in. So because it becomes our responsibility from the requester, they have to know that what I'm receiving and what I actually have to mark it down into the system for what I have received. So this brings back to the question from Joe just now. That is actually the onus of and the responsibility from the requesters. So, but anyhow, this has been set, and it is actually cascaded out from the global and is within our IT policy. So this is still allowable with ELC. So if let's say if we are working somewhere else in the future, like probably then you can know that this 5,000 is not actually a common thing. Okay. So there is a manual receiving with ELC. PO line item of 5,000 and above, then they have to do a manual receiving and auto receiving with any PO line item less than the 5,000. So some of the people, they might be also trying to meet this target. So if the requester, they are wise enough, we don't want to do a lot of work, split a lot of POs. They say to get a POs, each less than 5,000, then they are able to do nothing. They don't have to do energy. So some people will try to play around with these groups. So, but that is not wrong. It's just that it creates a lot of work after that, and we are receiving a lot of invoice, and we are receiving a lot of IR that we need to do the GRIR matching and so forth. Okay. So later on, I will also bring up to another topic where how do we collaborate with our procurement team to ensure that we can reduce and consolidate some of the invoice that we are receiving by not receiving a lot of those tiny POs and tiny IRs. Okay. So far, I'll pause a while at here and then just a quick check. So far, everything's okay. And we will be having a short break at 3:45. Then later on, we can move on again. So I'll give you all a 5-minute break and then we can go on up until later on. Okay. Okay, so this is more towards on the system. How do we perform that system thing? I will not dwell into it very detailed because this is a very system kind of actions. So you can just follow it because mainly this is more towards on the requesters side, how they do the manual receiving. So at least we know how they do it and we know what are the errors that they are more prone towards. So they will click on the request and to receive and then enter the quantity. So the entering the quantity is actually a manual thing. It's a manual thing, and then the enter the accepted quantity, so it's a manual thing. So sometimes they are a little bit prone to errors, and then click submit and OK. Okay, so this is what they do. Sorry, I'm having a little bit issue with the mouse. Okay, so the reference ID field in the receiving, this is an optional, so they can put whatever they need. So let's say this information will pass on again to the delivery node within the eventual material document on the ECC. So it is something like a reference. They can put invoice number to, so then we can have a reference to ease us on the GRIR. So let's say if we encounter when we are doing the GRIR USR and we encounter that is always very hard to trace, and we do not know which one it ties to. So we can encourage them to put the invoice number here. So maybe perhaps we can also try this with the Ulama to ensure that they have they know that which invoice it relates to. But some of the times, because of the invoice, it may be received after, so they are not able to enter that. So that's why it is an optional steps. Okay. And then another note, tax and shipping fee. So in many countries' jurisdiction on the tax, we have different tax rates. So whenever the requester, when they raise a PO, they cannot include the tax in because the tax is a different item out of our P&L. So when we raise that tax into that expense, then we are actually overstating our expense because tax item, we will also perform it at a separate part during when we do the perform the accounting of the IR, when we do the matching. Okay. So far, okay on this. And if you see okay, so never include the tax during the goods receipt because AP we will handle that at our invoice stage. And when we do the matching, we will always check the GR quantity matching with the PO quantity and also matching with the invoice before we do the posting. So when we see a quantity variance, and we will stop and we will try to validate with the requester. Okay. So when the invoice comes in, then it will be this part. So when the invoice comes in, then the system will create an IR document. So that will be another audit checkpoint for us. So IR is also one of our manual control point that when we do IR, we will ensure that whether it is tied back to our GR or not. And so sometimes when IR and GR is not matched, the invoice can be blocked. Okay. So that is the system controls that we put in place by the ERC SAP system. Okay. So this is where the GR status overview. When we are receiving manually, then the status will be showing as the audit, and you are in the process of completing the manual goods receipt. And then you have the status as approved when you have already completed the goods receipt. This is how they show it in the Ariba ELC marketplace, and submitted. It will be shown when it is for a GR, when it's an auto receiving. So the approved status should be the same for both. Okay. So just now, when we reach about this very last stage of the PO, after we have made that payment, so that is where our PO closure and transfer we can do. Okay, so the requester can actually do different options. When the GR and IR is matched, let's say come back to our 200 pence scenario. So they have already gotten that 200 pence and we have already received that delivery note of 200 pence, and also we have received that invoice of 200 pence and we have made that payment. Okay, so the requester can actually select a closed PO, yes, when completing the GR. So this is where we can request the requester to do that. So another option is that they can reach out to the buying center and complete the GR and close their PO. So for this closed PO options, it is often being neglected by the requester because they think that, okay, there's another department, they can help us with this. But in fact, when we reach out to buying center, they charge us by transaction. So that's quite a lot of money because actually the buying center is supported by Essential team and they charge us per transaction. And so if let's say we can encourage the requester, when you do the GR, when you know that it's already fully matched, then make sure that you close the PO. And we do not need to do the cleanup after. Because again, for the unclosed PO, it will also be one part of the things which will catch the audit attention, that they will always see how come this PO is not closed, whether or not we want to modify the PO, making it bigger, increase the PO value, or reduce the PO value, or do some changes. So that is also another thing that might catch the attention. Okay. So this is the one PO close. Okay. So later on, we will also show you like what is the system they are never receiving a PO closure while doing the finance. Before we move on to this, please. Do you all want to have a short break? Okay. So we'll come back maybe in another 10 minutes. Okay. For those who are online, we'll connect back in 10 minutes time. Thank you. Thank you.你现在手上都有这样的，你现在是说这PTP 的地方，你看那个叫我现在有。segregate. Then 刚刚做这些说的时候，每个可能都边说时，我要去问他可不可以看这个题目。我们帮你出来一下，这个是他把那整个水果什么来的？都是比较是个什么题？是只有那一个request都是大概13分结束差不多。可是那一个版本还有其他人在用的。所以就只有他有这样子的一个传承是吧？我觉得这个你可以分享，就是你到时候你就以后可能在感觉你比较熟，你可以的分析。 同时你也可以上一个email，我觉得你可以准备一个 email，让我把这个东西这样，还是稍微分开之类。
对，市场那边卖什么这种，
对，因为你才知道你收到多少。对，然后不是我帮你去卖小蓝，但是在那个价格那边，这个这样会开始别人开始。这个状态，
对，就会找人好直接，
就很多东西说这些的话，就很聪明的这个人，跟你说，
现在每个月的那个觉得还要别上都是
对，你可以我觉得你可以用就是现在操作这个by right standard process 然后它的 gap 是什么？有OK，咱先说这个一个 table OK， standard process，所以你就讲现在我们要close 这个 gap 这个东西 OK，
就这样
然后会换，
不会
但是你尽量放大。
OK，
对，就是你从比如感觉来上这样子，把 involve 的比如说这个比如有多少而已，然后我们 NR11 involve 的有多少个比如，我用写一下那个收的，我们可以看到这个问题是什么？
因为感觉到主要就是很早，然后觉得每次用我这个东西，
对，哇，是啊，
然后就
那有没有大的比如
好像
都有
有
21503
还没
有啊？你去过北戴是有啥？看那边没有，为什么好明白了？因为21503年，看我这个比如其实是我们这边有点有些网红，但是我们在这旁边后来想我们就在像你那边有没有一些就是比较 challenge 的，就是比如主要就是毛利它不够
那个 PTP，
就是
他们每次遇到就那个 PO 我那都不够高。
对，因为它的 granularity 不同，它可能是by month 来 issue 那个 PO，但是其实它真正它的那个 actual 的 invoice 可能看它 campaign，还是对对，这个我们也是 bring up 给那个
其实手控翻转应该是他们，
我要没有查好，
就是那个 amount 是他们去confirm 去这样子，就是刚好是可以开的，而不是到我们这里的，是不一样的，那要
确实就是他们会 manage， 所以把那个压力可能去过来这里再来
他们应该是那个你们的 control。
对，所以 business control 其实是稍微比较 weak 一点的。所以我们最近和 Google Directly 现在其实都是在负责，然后跟他们讲你们应该要做很多事情。所以我们 audit 还是什么事情发生的时候，肯定是我们做了我们的好，然后至少我们不是担责任的那个方面。所以现在我们反而是这样子的一个东西。
现在很多都还没有不懂这样子做来过去啊，然后问我这个几做教授，
这个对，你现在去找完成证，你看讲每个月我们都会有这个表示的对象，就这个 site 的，然后你跟他讲，就是你差不多的问题
OK，
然后他对我们不要问这个，完成的是我们有专门的 central team 是在专门的这个的，给
也是
那个
每一次新的一个人来就问我这样子来过去啊，
没有，这还回去的，我们就跟他讲，这个我只是做水分的，对的，
对对。
嗯。
You didn't click your book here.
For another minute.
I think one mistake was equal to so much.
Then I think, let's see the question one. Perhaps we can possibly. Okay, welcome back. Okay, so we had a big short break, So we're coming back and then ongoing session, we are also going to cover some of the system demo on how do we do this. And also we are going to link to some of the real life scenarios that we can have some of the sessions. And also after this today's session, we are also going to cover in another separate session, day 2, of the workshop related case-by-case scenarios where we will be grouping into different groups and then we'll be doing that discussion. Okay, so I'll go on with that system demo on the manual receiving PO and PO closure while doing the final receiving. So Next, it is on the importance of the GRIR account of what are the IR document status and invoice exception types and exception handling, and some of our invoice overview, and common GRIR imbalance issues and solutions, and some of the month-end reminders. And then we'll talk about that later. Okay. So this is the IR status. We have a different document status where these are the reconciling. We have the IR. The invoice has exceptions that needs to be reconciled. And approving, the IR has fully reconciled, but additional approvals are added to the flow, requiring the approval prior to progress with the IR. And approved, the IR document has been fully reconciled and approved, and paying, the invoice has been sent to SAP, ECC for payment processing. And our pay is, this is only applicable for some of the invoicing countries, paid and rejected. The invoice payment has been made from SAP, and the status update has returned back to Ariba. And the invoice has been rejected by the invoice exception handler. These two status, it will be right back into Ariba. So this is actually a better solution for some of the countries with this approach when they have this feature. So we can have the end-to-end view. Whenever the vendor is asking for the payment status together with our invoice, then we are able to keep track directly from the invoice. So today, in a lot of our SMB, and TR markets, we are still within using the common ones or two. We do not have the right back feature. Okay. So this is the invoice value in Ariba summary versus the SAP view. They could look a little bit small. What you can see from here is that this is the status of being reconciled, and also with the amount, the GR and the IR. So Anis, I think for what you have learned recently, that you are also seeing this. You might be seeing what is the GR and what is the IR in our MB23 T code. So you are able to reconcile and see how much balance I think and think that invoice on the and the invoice exceptions, reconciliation and acceptance types. So any discrepancy is considered as an invoice exception, as must be reconciled by us in order to be processed. So all of these exceptions, it will be listed on the IR document. So it's an exception document, exception resolution that the requesters will be responsible for handling the invoice exceptions based on the error type as appropriate. Okay. So an email notification is also sent to you to alert whenever there's an exception needs to be reconciled. So it will be guided in the user notifications within the guided buying and the to-do list within the TL. Okay. And also we are also having another division. We call them command center, APEX command center. We are seldom connecting with this division, but they are actually running from the back. So this command center team, they are actually reporting to our Panama team, Panama P2P team, and they help us to do on all of the GRIR, doing the reconciling and the status. Whenever they see like it's a H item on the GR and IR, whenever it is blocked with the invoice exceptions, then they will trigger an email to ask that requester, hey, please perform your, please resolve your invoice exceptions. So they will ask them to do that. So at times when we are doing our GRIR, we can also sometimes somehow collaborate with this command center team. But this team, they are actually visible because they don't deal with the stakeholders and directly and also deal with the finance directly. So they work as a sole contributor team. Let's see. Yeah. So if there's any information needed on that, we still can reach out to them. And it's actually a 1% for the entire group. Yes,
In Panama.
reporting to Panama, but the person is actually outsourced. The exception handling. When an invoice is received in the ELC marketplace and not fully matched, it will generate an IR document. So this will be triggered based on invoice submitted to the supplier. This is something that we discussed just now. So an exception trigger will have the email subject action required. Approve the IR from supplier. Okay. So usually, maybe for this case, sometimes if Suzanne will receive that, Suzanne and Vicky, they will usually be receiving all these kinds of emails, action required triggered from Arriva because they are the PO requester. Yeah. Okay. Details will be visible when you click the view option. We need that. Yeah. So I will not dwell into this system, how do we operate on that too. But of course, these are some of the controls that they have already performed. So like the system trigger this invoice notification, email notification, it is also part of the controls that how do we govern that requester to ensure that their invoice is being handled. Okay. And also on the exception handlings, there could be different exceptions to be actioned by the requester. The first one is the PO receipt quantity variance. So whenever we have the receipt quantity variance, it indicates that the manual GR will have to be performed because we have already gotten the IR, but the GR is not done. So it will not hit to our expense P&L. So we have to have that if it's over 5,000, we have to ensure that requester, please do your GR timely so that we can hit into the P&L timely, because that is where that we have already gotten that invoice. So definitely they have already gotten their goods on delivery. So they have to do it timely. Because what happens is whenever we come to cross month, then we will be understating the, okay, so let's say January that person already received that goods, but they only perform that GR only in February. So this is a cross-month issue. But let's say if it's a cross-month, still acceptable. But when it comes to cross-year, financial year, for our case it's July until June. So if let's say they cross a financial year, then they would actually understate that previous year financial year P&L. So if that amount is significant, that would further impact to our P&L. That would attract the audit attention. So we have to ensure that this is why that we need to ensure our ESR is within that, especially on every year end. Okay. So shipping variance, this is some of the variance indicates that the shipping charge needs to be reviewed and approved or rejected. And there's also a special handling variance that the charges needs to be reviewed and approved or rejected. So suppliers is not able to backdate an invoice with an invoice date prior to the current date. So which is if we have already issued that delivered that goods or services, I'm the vendor, I can only issue that invoice after I have already delivered that goods and being duly accepted by the customer, right? So let's say if the vendor, they want to backdate an invoice, which means that they say, hey, I actually give you the goods and services only today, but I said you actually received that invoice last year. So we cannot do that because that is actually a red line that it will also trigger audit attention because it is like they manipulating the time of what is hitting into the P&L for when they deliver their goods on their end, and also it impacts our end as well. Okay, so this is a system restriction from the start of the payment term calculation. There is also one scenario where we call it after the fact. So we usually receive the invoice first, then only the requesters have to raise the PO. So that is also not the case, because now we go back to our process flow and the trigger matching. The PR has to be approved by the approver before we can ask the vendor to do something. So it's a no PO, no work policy. So for that scenario, if it's the case where the requester have already gotten an invoice, have already delivered everything, then only they start to do the system thing and raising the PO through the Aviva. So this is an PO after the fact, which is actually governed by the finance center. They will be asked to fill out a form, PO after the fact, and they have to justify why. So because right from the start, they have to ensure that PO is already there and then this. So another exceptions handling on the quantity variance. This is the email notification that it will show you from the email. Please approve this for item. And then from this example, we can see it is a PO received quantity variance. When you hover to the I, that button next to quantity, you can see the invoice item quantity is greater than the received quantity. So this is some of the exceptions that they will trigger due to resolve for the requester. Okay. But of course, all of this exception handling, it is not towards on the requester themselves, it is their honest to do that. So the reason why I'm reiterating this, because just now in one of our discussions, we realized that some of the requesters, they think that this is a finance job. We have to tell them what to do. But actually the onus and responsibility lies on the Aviva requester. And this owner of the process is actually under procurement and finance center. So requester, they tend to shift the responsibility towards finance due to the ease of their job. Okay. It's just a habit of working, ways of working. So this is something that we are trying to avoid. Okay. And this is a quantity variance where they can click onto that PO and click receive and then correct the amount received. So maybe in the beginning they have given the wrong amount, just maybe the typo error. So because again, this is a control issue about they have to ensure it is the correct amount that they input. So it's a manual control by the requester. So again, this is also a control point by the requester of what amount and the unit that they are putting it in. Okay. So this is the invoicing overview. The current ECT open text will be followed for the invoicing. The supplier emails the invoice AP and it is scanned for indexing and posting. And it will be automatically sent from PTP to PLC marketplace. And then the IR, the exception processing and approval routing will be executed in the PLC marketplace if applicable, like what I said just now in the invoicing module. And invoice status will be viewable in the PLC marketplace. Okay. So these are some of the items. We link it to our month end. So at closing, every open PO should have a matching GR and IR. So if either is missing, it will raise the GR and IR invoice, right? So our month-end governance checklist, we will have to ensure it includes all the GR posted before the invoice cut off. If let's say if they have already have the basis of goods has been delivered, they have received the acceptance report, they have already gotten the proof of delivery. And we have to review the GRIR clearing account, which is one part of the audit control and requirements. Clearing up our GRIR account because it's under the balance sheet and it's not within P&L. We have to ensure reflects the correct treatment of not overstating or understating our P&L. Okay, and also we also have to ensure there are some of the credit memos are being processed before some of the reversals, and lastly, some of the validation that exception queues are being cleared. So that is another part where the reporter have to report their end. Okay. So why did this matter? Because GIR sits on our BSR balance sheet. So each variance affects our financial integrity. So because the governance is not only a policy per se, it is actually we need to ensure the governance is about timeliness, completeness, and accuracy. So this will make our audit trails more defensible. Okay. So whenever we have our PO line items greater than 5K, the manual receipt, then we'll have to ensure that whenever there's a missing GR, we'll have to notify that requester because they tend to forget at times. So we also have the responsibility because it impacts our BSR. So this is our responsibility on the BSR that we have to follow up with the requester. Hey, please do the GR. And then, and also if let's say, on what basis that we have to approve that. Because in some of the, I'm not sure who of you joined the COR session, controllership meeting training last month. Yeah. So, yeah, you joined that, right? So our new controllership, regional controllership, who is replacing Robert, his name is called Anthony Ma. And in that meeting, he shared that some of the countries that are having this common issue, they are doing approvals for those things which are actually not received. And a lot of approvals are being performed without a basis, without a supporting document. So same goes to our GRIR. This also serves as one part of the part, if we have already received that goods, then only we can GR. But if we do not receive that goods or there's no basis or there's no proof of delivery or acceptance report, we cannot perform that GR. Okay. And then in this, they will also, we will have to ensure they have to receive in the DRC marketplace if they want to ensure that that budget and also that purchase order has been already fulfilled by the last day of the month before it's been closed. So because we also need to allow some of the time for the GR being reflected into our SAP. So we have to remind them earlier, you should do this again. So which is why we come out with some of the month-end checklists, telling them that, hey, negative workday X, you have to ensure you completed your GIR timely and improve. If let's say you do have a PR, then you have to approve timely. Okay, so these are the month-end reminders. Okay. Okay. So if all the criteria are not met, in which the PO is still open at the last day of the month, it will be included in the month-end approval, which is something that we discussed just now. Even though we know that invoice is not posted and the goods has already been received, but we have to ensure that approval is actually being supported with supporting documents. So for now, in a lot of the countries, the open PO report approvals, the requester and the PMs, they usually perform the approvals on the basis of need by date. In Ariba, we can set the need by date. That need by date is like, I expect that thing will be delivered to me on that day. So they use this as a basis to perform the approvals. But from an audit perspective, this need by date is actually not sufficient as a control because I only expect that thing to come. But did I really get that thing yet? Not yet. Yeah. So we cannot do that approval actually. So, but of course, these approvals it is also part of the responsibility under R2 as the process owner. And they have to ensure that all the approvals being posted by JAMPAC, they are being supported and those are defensible and being justified. So for our P2P owners is that in our overview report, usually we'll be requesting you, okay, you put that few disclaimer down there. You have to ensure your supporting documents are being supported, and then the DMs have to ensure all the approvals, accuracy, and everything. And quotations are not allowed because quotations is just like, hey, I want to buy this thing, but I haven't got it. So quotations are also not allowed because one big scenario that we identified through the Singapore audit is that Singapore requester, they always use quotations for approvals. So they overstated their P&L. When they do approvals, they debit expense and credit approvals. Okay, so they overstated their P&L. So for that month, they look like, hey, somehow the auditors will think that they are manipulating their figures. Okay, so this is why that we are also having a big issue in Singapore. So try to avoid that. If we see if there's a very huge amount, try to then, hey, PM, make sure you have this supporting. Just do our part and then you guys as we can. Okay. And then when the PO line item is less than 5K auto GR, it will, since the line items are auto received, an invoice is required for the expense to hit our P&L. And we have to ensure that the vendor send the invoice, outstanding invoice, to our correspondent invoice submission box. This is also another note that we have been reminding the vendors. Usually they tend to send invoice into payables mailbox, but they are not submitting to the correct mailbox, invoice mailbox. So invoice tend to miss out, or they will even send the invoice directly only to the requester, but without informing the tenants. So from control's point of view, invoice submission, ideally, everything should go through only finance. It shouldn't go through anywhere else. Cannot go through the buyer, cannot go through the business department, then only pass through finance. That's a no. This is the month-end reminder, so we have to ensure the last day of the month that we need to control those. So next, most common issues causing an imbalance on the PO. There are a few scenarios. So before we delve into this, maybe we can also see what are the scenarios that you are facing in your daily challenge. Maybe do you want to start off? Since you have done POs.
What issue?
Usually, is there any common issues on the imbalanced GRIR that we are having?
Maybe we have forgot to do manual GR. So I always have to keep in mind every time.
Yes. So I think, yes, I think that is a very common issue because in certain companies, when we do not have that 5,000 threshold limit, then it becomes the first priority of that requester. I have to do manual GR before the invoice can come. So there are two ways that we can govern this scenario. Is that one, we need to also inform the requester, you must do GR before we can receive an invoice. On the second part, we can also collaborate with our procurement team, saying that we do not have a GR to prove this, and the vendor has already issued us an invoice, which is not the case. And this will be also attracting the audit attention. So we can actually also flag the scenario by confirming this scenarios to our procurement team. So get them to push to the vendor saying that you must give us the proof of delivery on the service acceptance report before you can actually even issue an invoice. Yeah, you can do it concurrently. That's a very good example. Apart from you, maybe Alicia, do you want to share Yeah, those scenarios.
quantity inspection, PO and the IR, I mean the invoice amount. So we need to check like whether they have additional bill.
Yes. So at times, they also did not, the requester, so some of the details coming from the upstream process, they have to ensure that the quantity, everything is in line before the invoice can actually be issued to us. It's not until when finance, when we want to do section, then we only go back to them. So this is the culture and the habit of the business communities that we are trying to change and reflect also. So with the new global directive that go forward, controls and governance is a very, very important aspect. We slowly can shift this towards to that. If we are constantly seeing all these kind of scenarios, we can try to compile together, and then we can put out as in, which is something that we are also working with our ESI topic owner are working, and we will be demonstrating some kind of reports showing that the top requester, top vendors, what are the common issues, top vendors or the top each vendors and the top vendors for each requester. So we can start to educate them and to slowly move the controls and governance towards that. So yeah, I'll just move on with some of the common issues. So there is a GR, but IR not posted. So we have to forward a copy of the invoice to AP for review. And if there is an IR, but GR not posted, then we have to send a request to buying center to post GR. But again, this GR can be also manually performed by the requester. That we can save that cost savings from asking buying center to do that transaction to us. When you will see a lot of the things when they ask us to mention, send a request to ELC buying center, it's because they also want us to send the transaction to them so that they can have more transactions. Okay. So, and then for the third one of the posting were reversed. If IR was reversed, but there's a GR posted, the GR is not valid, then we have to reverse. And if the GR is valid, then we have to ensure like why is the invoice being reversed. Okay. And one of the posting were reversed, but if the IR is not valid, we have to request a credit memo and forward to the GRI team. And also, if we have the IR valid, we can post the GR and send a request to the bank center or the requester to perform the manual GR. Okay. And also, the supplier credit memo is received. We have to ensure a written delivery, a negative connotation must be completed to match the credit memo. So what happens when we have a credit memo? Ashok, you can get an example.
Reduce the amount.
Yes. So let's say a common issue when we are having a credit memo in ELC is when we purchase maybe headsets device. We ordered for 150 and then we only get 120. But we are missing out the 30. They say, okay, no stop. So the vendor, they will issue a credit memo back to us. So this is where, because our PO, apply PO is already divided. So we also need to ensure that this credit memo is received so that we can reduce out the value and so that we can adjust our PO value. Because in this scenario is that they do not have stock and then we compromise and then we say, okay, now we just received the 120, then the 30, we give us a credit memo and we will reduce the PO value and close this PO. Okay. And then the next one, the GR and the matching IR may be posted against the different lines of the PO. So this is apparently an accounting error. So let's say Genpact is performing the posting and then they did an accounting error, they matched the wrong line, that it will also cause an imbalance. And lastly, the GR and the IR quantity does not match because we have to ensure that it is an exact match. And in some certain countries, we allow with the decimal, with the tolerance decimal amount. So if it's within like USD $1, we allow that because that is only like a variance. Because sometimes we have different items and the decimal sum up that goes to a small decimal variance, that is acceptable. But if it's a big amount, that is a different case. So the GR also cannot include the freight policy, which is according to our freight policy, and also cannot include tax, and because the tax is being calculated at the time when we do the invoice posting. Okay, so these are the common issues. And we also have a few more scenarios, which was not listed here, because when we come to GIR, we try to maximize, and we ever tried and we were able to come up with 20 or more scenarios in actual different currency, wrong amount, and then that person do a wrong timing, different kind of scenarios. So that one, we will be discussing that in a later session on our day 2 session. Okay, in our workshop session. Okay. So just now we talked about the credit memos. Credit memos are about issued by the bank supplier against existing invoice to correct credit back to certain amounts on that initial amount. Okay, so this process is also similar to that of a standard invoice. It's just that those are the negative values. Okay. So, and then once the vendor read the credit memo, it should be also processed prior to the reversal of the goods received. So the goods received reversal will also have to perform manually after we receive the credit memo. Okay, and again, although it was stated as finance center can do the reversal of the GR, the own requester can actually also do that. Usually when they accept the GR for a positive value, they just put a positive that they positive 150. But in that case, if you want to reverse the GR, so they put negative 30, then they can actually match back to whatever the credit is. So it's actually can be done by the requester also. So it's just that DLC requester, they tend to forget that they can do such thing. They can actually do. So it is something that we are going to shift towards that in the near future.
You mean that in the reverses, the user can negative? Oh,
They can do their own reversal. They actually don't need the buying center at all. Buying center is existing only for the state to ease their job. But to a certain point of the requester in the affiliate, they tend to heavily reliant on the company. They have to do everything for their job. But it's actually the responsibility is still with the requester themselves.
user much more convenient to sell. At that moment, a user can even together with the IR posting wrong from the equity especially. So let's say that equity posting wrong, if user also can reverse it by no need to reach out to buying center, just put negative and then insert the new quantity with the new amount.
Yeah, correct. So some of the requester, one we have to different groups. One is they know, they don't do. One is they don't know at all. Because for the newer groups of for these requesters, they may not know there is these features because they are being feeded by the inputs of buying center. Buying center said, hey, this guideline, you should send it to us. We help you do the plan. Reverse GR. But actually, they can do it themselves. So this is something that we can maybe, I'm not sure. This is the info that we have gotten from the IP and the procurement. So actually, they can actually do it. So if let's say we can try and error with some of the release, we are seeing that very common cases, need our effort to keep on requesting the buying center, go through a lot of activities and process. So let's try to just gain.
For what I mentioned just now that we discuss, user can do negative. Let's say that they won't do it, user won't do it. Instead, they put these tasks to buying center. So the same step buying center will do. Let's put negative also.
Doing just using an admin access, I log in as your user and I search this video and then I do the
The
negative.
wording correction is also
It's
just
the same
negative.
as. Yeah.
We charge.
Yes, they charge. So that's how they earn money. So if it's a deck themselves, actually like this kind of deck, they also will put like, please reach out to buying center. So that they can earn money. Yeah. So fun fact, this thing we also got to know after we know from procurement, because in the real world scenario, usually always and ideally is the requester, they have to do themselves. You do wrong, you amend yourself. You get a discount, you need to input yourself because only you know how much you get the discount. Yeah, so everything goes back to the requester. But here it is heavily reliant on the buying center already. So if so let's say before we go out to the and in the future, there isn't there isn't a deviation or department for buying center sometimes. Yeah, there isn't such a department even as
The buying center is what is to be.
yeah, just helping us to do the GR in ELC group. So in the real world, so you may see, so you will see in the real world that you will be such division in and you will really need to absorb the entire thing. You don't need to do GR, then you don't need to manage the GR. They just help to do all this work. And in some settings in the village, like Singapore, we have a dedicated person raising the PR and PO. But in many worlds, many companies, it also does not exist. The requester, you want to use it, HR, then HR will use it. Your marketing you will use it yourself. So they have to do their own job. This is what happened. Yeah, I think we are covering pretty much. We are quite on time. So lastly, this is also something like how do we form the credit memo and tie back to the invoice and the IR on the negative quantity and negative amount. Okay. So I think we are reaching to the end of this. This quick reference slide. So the rest it will be more towards on the appendix on how do we perform GR or IR in the RIFA, and some of the key concepts and the terms that training site you can have a view from there, so that you can go through the key terms, key concepts and terms. And then these are the buying center assistance, which we try to avoid. Okay. We are trying to find some of the cost savings that are helping the stakeholders as well, so that we can find some of the cost savings and having the seniority about what the requester can do and what the village can do. Slowly moving away from all this costing that we have unnecessary costings. Okay, these are some of the SAP codes and etc. So I'll stretch a little bit maybe another 10 more minutes. So before we close, I will also take some of the questions and share some of the observations. Just now, many of you will have already shared some of your scenarios. And what do you think? Maybe I'll just give an open topic, the final one. What part of the process gives you the most challenge? from a governance point of view. What part of the process give you the most challenges from a governance point of view? Like you want to have control, and just now, like, I think both of them they have shared, like the PO not being cheap, having continuously with them. I think that is part of the challenge. And Alicia is facing some of the PO quantity variance that having some of the challenge. And now I'm open to all of you that if there's any challenge, even though it is not a PO process, then what kind of process that you are thinking that you are having the most difficult challenge? And we can try to detect whether or not there is controls in place.
For Thailand that I observe, challenging of process pretty much is challenging the behavior.
Yeah. Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
Soft.
Yeah, so we recently remember that we agreed that we're going to have the table every Friday, local 20, and then 24. That I just recently I received that they need extra payment to be added on another on 15 next week. And then they are being delayed and approved on their side. So the cost like need us to run another additional payment loan.
I see. So they are constantly requesting some of the cyber
Yeah.
kinds of waivers. Okay, I think with that, we can also try to see, because most of the times when we are rushing for payment, usually the utmost root cause is derived from whether or not the PR bill and invoice is being received on time. So do we have that
Some
method?
some from user or from the side, mostly, especially if we run the urgent payment on the PO there, at least you need to take 1 day to release a block, right? At least 24 hours to make sure that our block is lifted. But payment need on 10 tomorrow. So you need to send me at least on Tuesday or Wednesday, not Thursday.
Yes. So I believe
That is the challenge that I need to face. But most for operation, I believe Genpact will have a good answer because they are doing the operation, they are doing the process. From right now, from just now in the morning, I received one. IR wrong posting for PTP and GR also is wrong for PTP. From this, actually, we can avoid it from P2P. If you see the PO race doesn't match with the invoice, usually book at first. But why you continue to book? So now it becomes when you book the invoice, the auto GR is triggered. So now you have that work. You need to reverse. You need to contact the podium and light senders to reverse it.
Yeah, I say that you're actually bringing a very good point, because most of the times our payment is rushing due to the extreme process, which is causing the delay. The block is not resolved on time, and even the why is like even the block. And so I think with that, it's also a global directive future directions that we also want to see what are the issues that we're facing. We try to log that into some of the issue logs, and then we can try to see if there's any specific to vendors or specific to the requester that we are having this challenge for. And so we can govern from that and starting to take some of the controls towards that.
That's for me.
Thanks for your reflection on this. Maybe Anis, do you want to share as well?
Regarding
The biggest challenge?
this challenge during the
10%.
so far, it's actually last time doing the Thailand invoice processing. That one is the biggest challenge for me because I need to do like I need to translate things before I can put inside the one I always do wrong that one. I think that one is actually like challenging for us as non-Thai speaker.
The language.
The language barrier is there. Other than that, it's an okay one. Except for the Thai.
Yeah, and also I think one characteristic of Thailand invoices is that
It's very strict one.
not only on the language itself, sometimes on the due rights as well. So that's why they are more prone to complexity of the quantities and the duties. Yeah, so this is also a way of how the agreement is being signed. Then we go back to way even earlier before our purchase requisition starts, how the contract is being signed. If we say that our contract we have to be this way, then it actually makes our life more easier. Yeah, and if we have the PO with a more consolidated way, then we have to reduce invoice because sometimes we receive like USD 10 in one invoice and then we have hundreds, right? So that is something that 100 invoice of the USD 10 we can actually combine together. We just issue one invoice. One invoice is actually of the way how do we govern the procurement team as well? How do they sign the contract? And how does the requester negotiate with the vendors? So those are the things that we can actually slowly move towards that happen. And this is somewhere from how we look at it as we imagine. So thanks for your openness. And then maybe Chloe, because I think they both have shared. So how about your challenge?
Yeah, that time when I was doing the lemon posting, so yeah, it was really, I think especially the language barrier and everything. And also it's very, very time consuming, to take a picture, wait for the translation to come up and then type it in. So, and then also sometimes the date, I'll get the dates messed up because of the year and everything. Yeah. And also sometimes they are in the invoice, the date and month will be in Thai. So sometimes we have my write wrong. It's June. Because I've been doing June. It's only on July and I didn't release that. So yeah. I don't know, like, would it be, what if we ask like for them to send us an invoice that is standardized?
So a lot of companies, if they are Aviva, they have a further extension. Maybe some other systems are, but I will not mention that specific here. So for some other companies, what they will do is that we build a system, a supplier collaboration system, which you can do invoicing to our system. So you use my format. So everything comes into my policy. No matter you are what language, what kind of language, everything the vendors, that is how procurement collaborates with the vendors. You come into my system or you do the invoicing and everything is in my format and that format is actually directly integrated into my SAP. So we have one standard language and we don't need to have so much complication. If this one you write it is a service, but actually is this a service or not? And we do not know. So if they follow our standard, that is actually improves the way of cycling. Yeah, that is actually something that is happening in some other companies. But we are not doing it here yet. So this is something that it should be part of the opportunities that we can explore. Yes. They brought up a very good point as well.
Especially when if you're not sure the item, what is it supposed to be? They say like it's like a very big thing, like a fluffy bag. Like what is it supposed to be for? You know? I was thinking like, what is this for?
Yes.
It's a service or what? So I was like, there's also there are very, very different tax codes, right? So you have to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
That was it's like, oh, so,
Well, I think it's true because in Aviva, they actually also can select correct their category. The requester is also very important when they have to select the right thing. I go and buy stationery, I don't go and select, I buy something like that, and they have to select the right category so that it falls back to the same category and same language that they have received. And at the same time, the vendor also plays a very important part. The procurement have to tell them what you do on it. Wherever it's stated, that is actually as part of our controls as well. The invoice bill, we need the invoice entity being billed to who, and then whatever it details, is this a service or not, yes, no, and then what are the breakdown? Service and goods you have to speak into two lines. Speak one line goods and one line services. That makes very clear for us. And let's say information and it will be much more easier on reporting tax. Yeah. So I think those are some of the opportunities that we can explore. So there are a lot of fun things that we can play still in the Okay, so I think thanks for that. I think it's very important that we discuss all of this because every challenges that we face, it actually comes to opportunity or process improvements that we can actually govern and put the controls in place. Even starting from the PR up to the PO voice, GRR, and voice. So do you all, Alicia and Jolene, do you still want to share some of your challenges other than some of the PO and so that we can bring up and then
Like Indonesia still okay, but only right now, like, right now, like, always submit invoice bill. Then need to wrap for the payment.
Become happy.
Yeah, Vietnam, they are very having a very strong controls per se. Actually, they're having a very strong control as in the foreign vendors because it is actually subjected for the withholding tax. And there's also complexity of withholding tax in Vietnam. So which is why in the local reviews, we try to see because the bank also serves as a regulatory to review what do we process on transactions in the foreign transactions. So it is a very important thing as per the regulations and regulatories that we need to ensure all of the documentation like custom forms while we buy everything everything from end to end. Yeah. So the same goes for our Malaysia lab. Similarly, like since we implemented invoicing for Malaysia, we also require the K1. K1 number is the customer number, the form number. So whenever it comes to the income, we expect it to that number. So all of this documentation will become the requirement for the local. When they have to gather everything, the complete pack, then only we start to process. It's actually benefiting us, but it also gives us a little bit pressure on the other hand because of the urgency of that payment. So for locals, we have Vietnam, we have two to help them to speak to those documents. In other countries, we have to do tools. So we are the one doing all the documents. So the responsibility is also lies on right. These are also some of the standardization. We can see that it also serves as an opportunity for some other countries to do this as well. She addressed all of the challenges. Yes,
Good thing to have shared. So business is driving.
So one thing we can think of everything, there must be a control point for the P2P transaction. There has to be a control in everything. So we're looking back to what is the control before we do one another action on activity. And that is where that we can perform some activities and we can perform some of the system improvements or supplier reliability invoicing system or maybe some of the organization of the process etc. So I think hope these are all of the processes that we can really segregate like P2P with our three-way match to protect our accuracy. So if we link back to all of the timely GIR, we have to ensure that GIR is balanced and balance sheet is reconciled and justifiable, defensible, so that it serves as our audit readiness. And also governance is also part of for this year. So I'm going to cascade down for what Chanel is going to help us to have in the future and we grow as the finance professional. So we start to build in not only operations we are doing, we still need to work towards what are the controls, what are the governance here. So whenever we do one thing, and it's very time consuming, it's very complex, definitely there's something. And with that, we can find ways to build that controls and governance. No matter it's a manual control or system controls, as long as it is control and it serves and match to our three-way matching policy, with the approvals in place, with the documentation in place, and that is where that we have only developed. So I think pretty much, yeah, I'm stretching a bit off time. I hope I don't drag you all very long. Thank you for your participation and supported this training development record as well. This will be part of our some of the P2P reflections of what we're going to do ahead of FY26 as well. So some of the validation things. And more importantly, it reflects how our team will always be remembered with how do we drive compliance and okay. Yep. So thank you everyone for joining. So I'll be also sharing a training evaluation form at the end of the sessions. And we will be also anticipating another session 2 on day 2. And we will
Okay.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you so much.
So today is something